I couldn't shut off. Like the anxiety and the pressure at some points were crippling for me. And I would have panic attacks at 3 a.m. I haven't had a panic attack since I've been working for someone else, which is quite nice, frankly. So, yeah, I think being an entrepreneur is not for everyone, and it's definitely not for me. I love entrepreneurs. I love that entrepreneurial spirit, and I love supporting businesses.
Welcome to Small Acts of Rebellion, a podcast where the unspoken narratives at the intersection of our personal and professional lives come to light. I'm your host, Heather Pridemore, your guide on this journey of discovery and defiance. Join me as we uncover the rebellious spirit that shapes our careers and lives. It's time to own your story. Are you ready? Today's guest is Allie Stofflet. Allie grew up in Wyoming, where she jokes she spent 18 years figuring out how to leave. But she credits that upbringing for shaping her appreciation of community and small business. Inspired early on by her grandmother, who boldly started a handmade candy business later in life, Allie has carried that entrepreneurial spirit through her own path. After discovering that corporate life and department stores weren't for her, she went on to own and operate a wholesale distribution business specializing in holistic and natural parenting products. Today, she serves as the Director of Business Outreach and Growth at the Greater Arvada Chamber of Commerce, where she combines her passion for supporting small business with the stability of a steady paycheck. Outside of work, Allie is a traveler, beekeeper, gardener, knitter, and devoted mom and wife. She's also deeply engaged in her community through Arvada Sunrise Rotary and the Porchlight Family Justice Center's Fundraising and Development Committee. Welcome to the show, Allie.
Thank you very much. I have a little imposter syndrome based on your previous guests, but I'm honored to be here.
No, this show is all about everyday people doing personal, professional things. And so I think it's a great match. I know you through the chamber, and then we're also both on Rotary together. So we travel in some of the same circles, which is how I got to learn a little bit of your backstory, which is why I'm excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you. You're so impressive, your background, and I just love what you're doing at Art Spark. So I was just singing your praises yesterday, actually.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. Also really grateful that you agreed to be on the show. I thought your story was really interesting, Allie, and I thought we could begin by talking about some of just your professional journey, because a lot of times, well, first of all, my priority is always to have people on who are employees of companies, because the people most easy to relate with are people who are working a W-2 job. I think that's what most of us are familiar with when it comes to our careers. But more people who have their own business are interested in being on a podcast. And so I get a lot of folks who come on, similar to myself, and talk about, I left corporate to kind of do my own thing. And what I thought was most interesting about your story is you actually flip-flop that. And so you left doing your own thing to go back to a W-2 role. And so I guess I just thought we'd start with a conversation there, Allie. You've had experience as both a business owner and as an employee, both before and after. And I'd like to just start with you sharing what led you into your business ownership in the first place, and then ultimately what drew you back into W-2 work.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of fell into owning my own business. I had a baby and I had left the corporate world to essentially be a stay-at-home mom. I got a part-time job and then started working for a different wholesale distribution company as a salesperson. And it wasn't going great. And I saw an opportunity to leave there and duplicate what they were doing. And I was really lucky that one of the owners of a brand from that company really believed in me. I will forever be grateful for her because she just saw something in me that I probably wouldn't have seen in myself, especially as a new mom. You are going through like a lot of postpartum things. Motherhood gives you an immense amount of self-doubt. And she just saw something in me. So she encouraged me and I started this business. And it was great for me at that time because I could work around my child's life. I might be working after dinner, late into the evenings, but it allowed me to be available for my son. And he came to the warehouse with me and sat in the office. And I had a girlfriend that had a business in the same industry who had a young child also, and she would bring her daughter. But I never saw myself as a business person. I took one business class in college. It's not kind of what I thought I would do. Like I mentioned in my bio, my grandmother owned a business. My mom's parents were both entrepreneurs, and I admired them, but it's not something I really thought I could do. And I did it, and I'm so glad I learned a ton from it. But it was never in my plan. My husband sometimes will send me businesses now saying like, oh, this looks really interesting. And I have no desire to own a business again.
Does your husband?
I think my husband has a desire to not work a corporate job anymore. And I think the pieces of being a business owner that I was terrible at, he would be great at. We're a really good match in that way. That's just not on my plan right now. So I enjoy a steady paycheck and less anxiety. I think the greatest thing owning a business gave me is the insight that allows me to do my job now. So I think everything happens for a reason.
Now, I think you've alluded to this already, Allie, but I mean, the skill set that's required to work for someone versus working for yourself are different. And I'm just interested, like your own personal experience, kind of navigating that move from calling your own shots, being the owner, to then stepping back into a very like structured, potentially bureaucratic situation. You know, like what was it like navigating that transition?
It wasn't easy. I won't sugarcoat it. When you own your own business, and especially in my case, I didn't have employees. So it was really easy to make the decisions myself. I wasn't really answering to anyone. Of course, I was answering to clients, but I could make my own decisions. I could make my own hours. And I think for me, I could make mistakes and people didn't see them. Where transitioning into working for someone, now I'm answering, to someone else. I would say like I can be kind of difficult. Like I like my own way. And so that's definitely a struggle. Even from a technology standpoint, like I am so untechnical. And when I owned my company and my girlfriend owned a business, she was very technical. And she would look over and see me like working a handmade spreadsheet on a legal pad and just say like, what the hell are you doing? Like, that's what Excel and Google Sheets are for. But I didn't want to use Excel and Google Sheets. And so coming now to this full-time job where there are very high expectations and I'm answering to someone else and someone's checking me on my work, which you don't really have when you work for yourself, is tough. It also was a learning curve because I had to reteach myself skills that I wasn't using because when you work for yourself and you own your own business, it's very easy to avoid the tasks that you're not good at, right? So like I avoided using Google Sheets to no end. And now I am forced into using it. And so it's been a learning curve. I would say for me, the great part is I've realized I work better in collaboration, and I really enjoy having coworkers that I can lean on who have skill sets that I don't have, and that sense of camaraderie. I have some coworkers and we have a great relationship and we encourage each other. So when I have moments of self-doubt, I've got these people I can lean on. And when I owned my own business, yes, I had a mentor who was very encouraging, but her business also relied on my business's success. And I had a husband who is an amazing champion of me, but he was paying all the bills. And so I did feel pressure to make it work and make it seem like everything was perfect and that the business was going great and I was thriving because I didn't want to let these people down who had taken a chance on me. And when I have those moments of self-doubt, now in my job, I have a group of coworkers that can support me. And so I think that's been a great transition for me. I don't think it's probably for everyone. Also, a steady paycheck is lovely. I definitely didn't have that when I was owning my own business. You know, I was putting any profit back into the business. You know, cash flow is a struggle for any business. So a steady paycheck, benefits, and I care deeply about my job, but I can shut off at 5 o'clock. And when I owned my own business, I couldn't shut off. The anxiety and the pressure at some points were crippling for me. And I would have panic attacks at 3 a.m. You know, I haven't had a panic attack since I've been working for someone else, which is quite nice, frankly. So, yeah, I think being an entrepreneur is not for everyone, and it's definitely not for me. I love entrepreneurs. I love that entrepreneurial spirit, and I love supporting businesses. I believe that small businesses truly are the backbone of our economy. They're the most important part of our community. And I can support them in a different way now, which I really enjoy, but that's not the right job for me.
Yeah, it's interesting a lot of the things you just said are interesting to me. I mean, I think that what you were explaining about the experience of being a business owner, it's so real, right? I mean, I spent over a decade in corporate and have always been with teams. And even though I employ people, there are employees in my business, it's very lonely at times. And I do a lot of networking. You know, I have other business owners in my ecosystem. I have contacts like you at the chamber. And so, I mean, it's not like there isn't anyone to talk to about things. But at the end of the day, all the decisions are your own. And I don't know, that at times can feel very lonely. There's times when it can feel very burdensome. I think another kind of interesting thing that you mentioned about Ali was like the mindset and the skill set of someone who is suited for business ownership versus someone who is really better suited to be the employee of. And I just want to encourage those who maybe feel like, hey, I have an entrepreneurial spirit. You can still apply that in a corporate environment. I mean, I used to say I was intrapreneurial because I worked for a company, but I was like always thinking about, you know, how do we build the business and how do we drive things forward? And so I think I am well suited for being on this side of the equation, but I could see how if someone didn't think they were, they might still have that skill set, you know, to help with things like business development, go to market. All those things are very entrepreneurial, like at their core. And so just some like really interesting stuff. I think we're kind of segueing a little bit, Ali, into the business of business, right? Which is what you do at the chamber. So having sat on now both sides, I just wonder like how you feel like your view of what it takes to run a business has evolved, and maybe what you feel like, you know, is most misunderstood about the process or the systems, where you think things can get really complex. So just your perspective, because you've been on both sides of the equation.
I would say the biggest thing is, I think, if you aren't working very closely in a small business, because I think there are people who work for a small business owner that see these aspects, but a lot of people don't. And so there's this misunderstanding by, I think, a lot of people that being a business owner is the best thing ever. And that being a business owner is so easy. And it's really easy to villainize businesses because the businesses we see on the news are oftentimes very large corporations that maybe aren't taking care of their people. Their CEOs are making tons of money. That's not the reality of what I see, though. And so having been a business owner and understanding the struggle makes me want to support them more because I have this empathy. I've been there. I know what it's like to mortgage your house to start a business, and that the failure of your business is so much more than the closure of that brick and mortar. It's can impact your family's generational wealth. All of these pieces, you know. And so I think that the public has a misconception of business. And so I try to get them to understand that, like, these small business owners are not paying themselves tons of money. They're probably paying their staff more than they're paying themselves, and they're not taking vacations. And even if they are taking a vacation, I have yet to meet one small business owner that's like, I took a vacation and I totally shut off and I didn't think about my business at all. No, that doesn't happen. They're thinking about their business at dinner, and it's a heavy load. And I think so many of them thrive at it, and they don't need pity, but what they do need is understanding and support. So when we talk about purchasing decisions, like, yes, it is easier to buy from a large business online that will deliver to your door. But it is better to buy from the small business that is also donating a silent auction basket to the nonprofit that is supporting the kids that go to school with your own. So I think it's those purchasing decisions that the public need to be aware of when they're supporting small business. And I think it's policy. The chamber's very active in policy. That's not necessarily my role. I'm not well suited for dealing with politicians. Luckily, we have members on our team who are much more tactful than I am when it comes to dealing with that. But policies are made, and they're not necessarily in the best interest of a small business. And so I think there's just this misunderstanding of how hard it is to run a business. And I didn't understand that, like, I saw my grandmother running this business and she owned a candy shop, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And the woman who worked in her shop was like her best friend, and she paid her under the table. And as a kid, I didn't know what that meant. And now that I'm on the other side, my grandmother's no longer alive. Like, I wish I could have a conversation with her, because now I see how hard it was for her. When you're a kid and your grandma doesn't visit because she's got to work in your business, you just think, well, she doesn't want to visit. But that's not the reality. It's that she can't afford someone else to come in and work those shifts for her. I think there's just a deep misunderstanding of small to mid-sized business and the struggles and the sacrifices they make and how important they are in our community. Growing up in a small town, I think people understood it so much more because, you saw the owners of your business all the time. You saw them at PTA meetings or football games. But in a large metro area, I think we're really disconnected from who owns the businesses in our community. And there needs to be a lot more compassion and, I think, call to action to support them.
You mentioned like the big corporations, but I personally see another sort of source of, let's just say, misinformation or maybe misguidedness as some of the influencers online. And so I'm not going to call any specific names out, but,
Sure.
There are some folks who are pretty well known online in this, what I would consider like the small business space, who they go on and they talk about how easy it is to acquire businesses and how easy it is to improve these businesses and make a profit. And the reality is like, it's oversimplified. First of all, the whole process of acquiring a business is very opaque, which it shouldn't be because like the components are honestly fairly simple, but it takes a lot of going to the right places to get the right information. And even when you go to sites, that are dedicated to providing potential small business owners with information, it can be a little convoluted at times, right? To like sift through. And so I just think that sometimes the message is like, it's so easy to be a small business owner. You're going to take your $500, tax return and you're going to launch a clothing brand and be wildly successful in driving an Audi R8. Or, you're going to go and buy all these laundry mats and now you're a millionaire because you own a bunch of laundry mats. And it's just, it's not impossible. And the dream is definitely there. But I think that there's a lot of context in the middle that's missing. And I can't speak for all business owners, but over my journey, I have found that relationships at things like the chamber and like some of my other groups in the entrepreneurial space have been really impactful to not only kind of learning the things like that I didn't know that I needed to know, right? So you kind of pick things up from other people, but then you also have resources and places you can go then when you do need something or need some guidance or direction on something. And I mean, it's maybe not always the sexiest part of like being a business owner, but it's like, it is the reality. It's the day to day.
Yeah, I think I talk to people who want to start a business and they'll come in, and sometimes I feel like maybe I'm a dream killer. And I want to support small business, but I think you're right. Like they might see these influencers and they're like, identify a problem in your community and just create a business. And so they jump first. They jump into it. They sign a lease. And then suddenly they realize it's going to cost them $200,000 to reshape the space the way they want. And that it's not going to be done quickly. So they're not going to get income. And I think if we have honest conversations about the reality of business, it will make businesses more successful. I don't want someone to start a business just for the sake of entrepreneurship and then fail. That hurts the entire ecosystem of businesses. I want businesses owners to have a full picture of what this is going to be like for them. And if they decide to move forward, they will be a better business owner because of that. But it is not all glamorous. Like, I was the CEO of my company and I was also the janitor. Like, so yes, I think like so many things on Instagram and Facebook, you see the shiny pretty and maybe not the reality of how much it costs, how hard it is, and at what cost. Like, we have to ask that too. Yes, you might be able to buy several businesses and that aren't successful and cut your employee wages or cut costs and make them profitable, but is that making the business better? I don't know. You know, like, I think there's a lot of conversations around, you know, employee care that we need to talk about when we talk about a small business. Also, business owner care. You know, there's a whole self-care movement. I've never seen people that are worse at self-care than business owners. Like, they're constantly, you know, you don't eat well. You're up late at night. You're not sleeping well. You're putting everyone first. So, yeah, I think there needs to be some honest conversations about the reality of business ownership, just like there needs to be honest conversations about other things. And then we will find ways to support them. I can't support a business if I don't know what their real struggles are. And they have to be honest about that. And I know that can be really hard for entrepreneurs because you want to be successful. No one likes to go into a room of other entrepreneurs and be like, hey, I'm really struggling. We're down 30%. I'm losing customers. But by saying that, then the organizations like the one I work for can rally around that business and lift them up or find the resources they need to be successful. So yeah, I don't want to discourage people from owning a business at all. I just think we can do a better job as a society of supporting business owners.
I think the key pieces for people to understand is if you do decide to leave, the predictability of a W-2 role. And I actually don't agree that W-2 roles are safer than entrepreneurship. I actually think both are just equally as risky. But I do think there's some predictability and some stability in a W-2 position. And so if someone decides to leave that, they need to understand that just because you build it doesn't mean they'll come. And that marketing isn't the like the silver bullet that everyone thinks it is.
Right.
So there's a lot more that goes into running a business than just making a business, right? Filling a gap in your community or solving a problem. It's more than that. And even if you are solving a problem or addressing a gap, just because you build it doesn't mean they'll come. And so there's so many other complex issues related to small business ownership. I mean, you know, it's cheaper to start a business than it is to buy a business, but it's going to take a lot longer then to start generating revenue from a business that you start versus a business that you buy, right? And so these are like little nuanced things that like I don't think people who are trying to convince others that like business ownership is this awesome and amazing thing to do are really talking enough about the real, like the real, right? Like the real details of what it is.
It's a grind. You know, you're constantly having to reevaluate everything that you're doing, or you should be, right? And it is a grind and it's all on you. And I think there are people who do that so well. Like I get to see incredible business owners and I'm in awe of their ability to like spin 15 plates in the air and do it really well. But yeah, it's not a solution to, I don't like having a boss and I don't like answering to someone. And so I'm just going to start my own business because everyone answers to someone. You're going to answer to your clients or your customers. You're going to answer to your staff if you have employees. You're going to answer to the government who is putting policies together that make decisions for your business. So it's not, if you don't like working, then being a business owner is not the solution for you.
It's like the opposite of
yes.
that.
Yeah. I don't like working 24/7, 7 days a week, which is why I'm not a business owner anymore, you know, because it was too much for me. I think I'm just like a very anxious person full of self-doubt, and that was not a good mix with being a business owner at all.
Okay, so that's actually a really good transition because one of the other topics I wanted to discuss was at the highest level anxiety. And, you know, we're talking kind of about the sort of visible hustle of business and business ownership. But then there's also that internal dialogue, right? The one that no one sees. And the reality is this happens whether you're a business owner or you work in a corporate job. Like these two things are very real. Many companies are saying to their employees, we're going to do more with less. And I talk to a lot of people about navigating things like burnout and prioritization. And, you know, they're juggling 15 plates, but someone's asking them to juggle 20. So, I mean, like the grind is real and it doesn't matter whether you're just a business owner. But I'm curious from your experience, what you see is like as the relationship between the anxiety and the ambition. And if you have found it to be a driving force, a barrier, or both. So, I mean, you know, like the two can be closely related when you think about ambition and anxiety. And I think it's nuanced, but they can both be driving factors. And so like, what's been your, I guess, perception, not only from your firsthand experience, Allie, but also from working with so many small business owners over the years?
I would say for me, it's probably both. My anxiety can be a driving force if I can kind of harness it. It can also be very debilitating for me. I would say it was worse when I owned a business because I wanted so badly for it to be this huge success. I had taken this leap. You know, my friends and family were all watching, and I didn't want, you know, I wasn't bringing in money like I would have if I'd gone back to a corporate job. And so I didn't want my husband to know that, you know, I was having all this anxiety and pressure because he already had the pressure of paying our bills and he has a high pressure job. And so you really just kind of like, for myself, I was internalizing all this. And then when it was, you know, my panic attacks always came at 3 a.m. when my husband was asleep. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think my body knew that was an easy way to hide kind of this anxiety. That also drove me though. Like I would say the day after my panic attack, I was really productive at my office. And so I don't wish that system on anyone. I have a teenager and I try and watch him to see if I can identify if he's inherited my anxiousness. So I think it can be a driving force. I see it in business owners, I think what I see more though is they're not wanting to admit it. You know, we have different groups at the Greater Arvada Chamber, and there's different levels of vulnerability in them. So you're part of Inspiring Women, and I think that group is kind of a safer place for those business owners to share some vulnerability around their anxiety or their struggles. But I think there are other business owners who don't really want to share that they're having that anxiety. No one goes into business not wanting to be successful. And so sometimes they don't want to admit that, like, they're struggling on some level. But I do see it, you know, right now, breweries and wine and liquor sales are not doing great. And we have a large brewery culture in Colorado. And so I do see, when I talk to breweries, them saying, like, I'm really anxious right now. Like, things aren't going great. I see that now. I think it probably drives them to make some choices. It's that, like, fine line. I think you have to figure out what works for you. I would say the biggest motivator for me, other than anxiety, is spite. Like, spite motivates me. Like no, nothing. If someone tells me I can't do something, I will definitely be doing it. Or I think if I hear a bug where someone's like, oh, that business isn't good, like, I'll start to show that business so much love because I want to prove someone wrong. I think it's getting better. I don't know. You've been in the business world longer and you're part of other business organizations, but I do see kind of a shift where business owners are talking more about these kind of mental health issues within business ownership. I don't remember 4 years ago hearing as many conversations about isolation as a business owner, but now it's something that we talk about a lot, that it is very isolating, and how do you overcome that or build support systems? So do you find that it's getting better?
I mean, I don't know that I'm a good source to confirm or deny, simply because one of the things I have personally tried to do, especially since I left a corporate environment, is to try to just be really honest about the state of things, right? Mm-hmm. And so that includes, like, mental health and concerns over how business is performing, and just want to live more, like, authentically. I mm-hmm. think that my experience in the corporate space, and especially because of the industries I was in, there's a lot of peacocking, right? So a lot of big egos. Everything's always awesome. I up myself, month over month, year over year. Everything's, like, golden. Even when you look behind the curtain and you actually know for a fact that, like, that is not the case. That's sort of the persona that is being, like, put out there. And I do think there are some small business owners who probably feel some of those same pressures to kind of mm-hmm. pretend that things are better than they are. I will also say, though, that there's something to, like, you can be honest about things not performing the way you want, and also at the same time still be positive and happy about things that are going well and things that are trending in a new direction. Case in point, we opened a second Art Spark location this year. That location has been slower to get up and running than I had anticipated. But all of the things that are happening are very positive, right? And so when people ask, like, because again, you said your friends, your family, the community, they all want to know how it's going, right? Like, they're all rooting for you, but they're also all watching. And when they ask, it could be really tempting to just say something generic, like, oh, it's going great, or, things are going well. But sometimes the reality is, like, actually, it's going slower than I expected. A, right? That's the truth. But B, the people who are coming are giving us great feedback. We're seeing repeat guests. And so those are all things that tell us we're moving in the right direction, even though the growth has been slower than we anticipated. And that's coming from someone who went in knowing that there'd be a cold start problem in a new market. But for the brand new entrepreneur who's not expecting, they're like, oh, I'm going to build it. I'm going to open the doors. Everybody's going to come. It's going to take even longer, right? Because there's not mm-hmm. any of that preparation to sort of overcome that cold start in the new market. And so, I talk to a lot. I first of all, I spend a lot of more time these days with women. I was in two male-dominated industries for most of my career. Nothing against men. I've had some great male mentors. I think men are great. I'm married to one, but at the end of the day, I just enjoy being around some additional female energy. And so I do spend a lot more time in groups that are predominantly women and predominantly entrepreneurs, right? People who are running small businesses or creating things, launching products, that kind of thing. So spending a lot more time in those spaces. And I think some of what you're talking about, Allie, about people just talking more about things like burnout, self-care, isolation, that just happens more naturally, I think, in those groups. And then I think too, when people know that you're willing to be open about what you're going through, it makes them also feel then more open to come back and share as well. So I don't know. I don't know that that's a good measuring stick for how, culturally, if we're more open to talking about these things.
Yeah. I hope we are. I think when I owned my business, I was in a predominantly female industry, and there was a lot of peacocking. I think they, a lot of them didn't want to admit that their business wasn't doing well because they'd be at a trade show and would be having a conversation, and all the other businesses around them were thriving or looked like they were thriving on their Instagram and their website. And so I didn't see a ton of that vulnerability, but I do now in these groups, and I think it's really lovely and gives me a lot of hope. I think that these businesses will support each other and that we can talk about kind of these struggles of, being a small business. So,
well, and I don't know if you're seeing this at the chamber, Allie, but for where we are right now in this current climate, economically, politically, there's just a lot of uncertainty. And every small business that I have spoken to about this is also seeing consumer, behaviors are shifting, the things people are buying, when they're buying, all these things are making small business less predictable, right? So the things that we normally rely on, like seasonality or certain types of programs, offerings, products, whatever it is, it's just not working the way that it normally does. And then there's sort of the anecdotal evidence too, in the fact that online, I'm seeing maybe businesses who don't typically do a lot on Instagram or, on the webs are starting to put a lot more content out, which also tells me that they're responding to some sort of shift in their business as well. And so I think we're just seeing all of this happen right now. And so one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, and something I personally would like to see, are more businesses and organizations collaborating. I think collaboration is going to be the strategy that carries us through these uncertain times. I personally am always looking for win-win-win solutions. And so where can an organization and a small business and maybe a nonprofit come together and do something together that isn't just a simple here's a check or let me buy your thing, but is something that really has ideally a greater impact. And so I don't always know what that looks like. It's something I'm currently exploring in various ways for my own business, but it's also something I think about when I talk to other business owners or when I even talk to other organizations. Case in point, after school programming has lost a lot of grant funds as we head into the new year. And there are a lot here in Colorado, there are several different organizations that support after school programming. They've had to restructure their teams. They've lost funding. Well, guess what that does? Now it impacts our communities because the people who work don't necessarily have the care for their kids after school. It means that kids aren't getting as much enrichment. It means small businesses or even nonprofits that power those programs aren't getting the ability to, go out and offer those services. And so that's impacting that part of the community. And so it becomes this really sort of ripple effect. And this is just one example, right, is after school activities. So think about after school sports, after school arts, programs that are at your school versus programs that are, maybe your kid takes music lessons or whatever. There's a whole network of these programs, and it's powered by a mix of community partnerships, nonprofits, for-profits, small businesses. All of these people support just this one component of our community. And so what I am constantly looking for is how do we find solutions? I think I'm diverging a little bit here, but I think about the story of stone soup from elementary school, where we start the soup with just a rock, and then everybody goes and pulls something out of their hidden pantry to add some flavor or some, nutrition to the soup. And in the end, we all have a soup and we share it, and the whole community eats. And so I guess that's sort of my strategy going into this year and probably even into next, is like, where can we find opportunities to find synergies, to find collaboration across different businesses, across different organizations. And so I think collaboration is an underutilized strategy, and it's certainly one that I'm leaning into as a small business owner. So I don't know, I rambled a little bit on stone soup, but
No, I love that. I wrote it down so I can start thinking about ways that we can support that. I think during COVID, we got really great at pivoting and doing collaboration among small businesses, and communities rallied around the businesses that they thought were really important. But we have short memories, and consumers have very short memories. And so I think we've kind of forgotten that is needed. We just had a campaign for bakery in Arvada, and they've been under construction, and that hurts sales. And so we made an effort to really rally behind them, and doing that reminded us here that that is a continual thing that we need to be working on. It can't just be during a pandemic. And getting creative about how we support the businesses. So if anything, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that can help me do a better job at my job, is how do we create opportunities for collaboration, and even if we're not involved, beyond just introducing businesses to each other who could collaborate well.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into like a planning session for collaborations, but it is like an area I have been thinking about a lot. And, I was on a call with one of those after school organizations, and they were talking about the challenges, and other businesses and nonprofits were talking about their challenges. And then I started thinking about service organizations like Rotary and Kiwanis, and like, what role if all these groups could come together and solve this problem? If this was our stone soup sort of scenario, like, how would we all come together and solve this problem? And I think that for small businesses, there's so much of that opportunity, if there's a shared demographic, but maybe we're not competing for the same share of wallet, or maybe there's interesting and novel ways to present ourselves to new audiences because of a partnership with some other business or organization. And so that kind of actually leads me to a little bit of an off-topic question for you, Allie. But, I was thinking about beekeeping, which I know very little personally about. I like
and
honey.
I could talk for 20 hours on it.
I like honey. I like honeycomb. I think bees are great. They help us grow vegetables and fruits and stuff.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about beekeeping and how there's this concept of far knowledge or far transfer. So it's where you basically take concepts and ideas from like one thing, something unrelated, and you're able to then apply them to other areas of life and business in novel and innovative ways. And so I know this is a little bit of like a left field question, but like, when you think about beekeeping, Allie, what sort of skills, lessons, like, I don't know, is there anything that you take from beekeeping that you're like, I could apply this to my work or to small business? Like, anything stand out there for you?
Well, immediately I just think of, and I said this yesterday, I was at a chamber function, and I was chatting with someone about beekeeping because I want to talk about it whenever I can. I think we have so much to learn from bees, especially honeybees. The honeybees' number one concern is the success of the hive. And the hive is its own complex organism that is made up of all of these bees, like, 100,000 bees or whatever it is. So yesterday I was telling a story that in the winter, the bees are alive, they're in the hive, they reduce their numbers for the success of the queen in the hive into the spring, and they only leave the hive in the winter when it's warm enough for them to go to the bathroom, because they won't defecate in the hive. And your bees can actually get dysentery from this. Like, they're so sacrificial that they will kill themselves essentially for the betterment of the hive. And I don't want people out there making themselves sick, but I do think like this idea of wrapping your brain around your local community and doing what you need to do to make it thrive is a lesson that we can learn from bees. I think the other thing about beekeeping is, and don't share my email because I'm sure there's many beekeepers who feel differently, but you cannot know everything about beekeeping or being a beekeeper, right? There is always a level of unknown. They're insects. They cannot communicate with me. Like, a lot of what I'm doing in beekeeping is educated guess. And so there is this need to admit that I don't know everything that's going on. And sometimes the best thing I can do is walk away from the hive and let it take care of itself and trust that they know what they're doing. And that's really hard because we as humans love to like control things and put things in a box. And you can't do that. I normally don't wear any protection when I open the hive. My bees are very gentle. I feel like they know me. It could be a delusion. But I checked on the hive. I'd been out of town for a week and I just wanted to check on them. And I barely had the top off. And one of them, she warned me. They always give you a warning shot. And then she stung me right in the face. And it was a great reminder for me that, like, I can't assume just because I'm having a good day and I want to check on them that they want to be checked on, right? They could have had a terrible day. In fact, the week I was gone could have been awful for them. And it was hot. They probably were getting robbed by other bees, or wasps were trying to get in. And so there's always this lesson, I think, from beekeeping of also, like, you don't know what that beehive is going through. And we need to think about that too in business. Like, we don't know what they're going through. And having grace for everyone. But, my focus is always on the businesses, and it's really hard for me, like, if I see someone complaining about a business on Nextdoor, because businesses are ran by people, and people have bad days. And giving them grace is what you should do. Don't pile more on their bad day. Because, like, I did that to my bees and I got stung in the face. I paid the price. For about a week, I paid the price. My face was very swollen for a week. And I think, like a business owner, you constantly have to learn more and teach yourself things. And, I've been studying beekeeping for 6 years, and I'm still learning and reading new books and trying to figure out what's going to work for me. So I'll stop because, like, I could keep talking about beekeeping. It's my favorite topic right now.
I have to say, though, Allie, you crushed that. I mean, you didn't know I was going to ask you about beekeeping and its comparisons to business. And so you did. It was more than I expected, and I definitely appreciate it. But we are coming to the end of the show, Allie, and I always like to wrap each episode by saying, if someone was like, this episode was way too long, I did not listen, what is one thing you'd want them to take away from our conversation?
I think the one thing is that business owners are the people in your community, and so they are worth rallying behind. That's the biggest thing. I'm like getting a little choked up.
Well, then it seems like that might be a good place to wrap this episode. Allie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored that you wanted to talk to me.
If you enjoyed this episode and are seeking to redefine success on your own terms, subscribe to Small Acts of Rebellion and join a community that celebrates authenticity and personal growth.